Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joe's Classic Video Games back with another cool pinball repair video for you this evening. We are working on this Stern Flight 2000 wide body 1980 pinball machine. I really like this game. I've had several of them over the years. We bought this one at an auction or somewhere a few years back and it's pretty tore up. But we've always intended on fixing it up. And we're right in the middle of it right now. So we did a video earlier where we kind of showed the condition that everything was in. And we discovered on the first video that the thing is missing the power supply. Horrible. Now obviously there's a bunch of wear on the playfield and stuff. I'm not that worried about that. I'm more worried about the power supply being missing because you can't, it's hard to find those. This I can repaint, but the power supply being missing is a thing, right? And it's not just the power supply like the rectifier board, it's the entire transformer is missing. Ooh. So really the only way to get one is out of another machine. And I do have one that came out of a Stern Stingray. So in this video we're going to try to swap it into here and see if we can get the power working. And you might say, why are you messing with that when you've got all this? Oh, this game isn't even worth saving. It needs so much work. Nonsense. Nonsense. This game is absolutely worth saving. We're going to fix it up and we're starting with the power supply, okay? So that's what we're going to do in this video. Now, we can't even plug it in yet because there's no power supply. So whenever we repair them, what we try to do is start at the wall, right? So we've got a good cord and then the power will go in the game, but there's no power supply in the game. So that's the very first thing that we need to fix. There's other things like the lockdown bar was missing and the receiver was missing. We've got that all figured out too. We've got a ton of work to do on the playfield. The back glass we haven't even lit up yet because there's no power supply. So we got to worry about that, and we've got to worry about all of the mechanics or the boards in the back. But we can't do any of that without a power supply. I like whenever we're working on them to be able to turn it on and at least have lights on the playfield and stuff, so you can see if it's even trying to boot or what's going on. But we can't even get general illumination lights without the power supply. So this is a big deal. And we want to get that rock solid. So the very first thing I'm going to do is on the older games, the power supply was up in the back box. But on the newer Stern games, by newer I say 1980, as opposed to 1977, just 3 years earlier. The slightly newer ones, the power supply was down in the bottom. So we're going to be working down there today. So I'm going to take this huge playfield out, get it out of the cabinet so we can get down in there and work and figure out our method of attack here. This is a big old wide body game, lots of drop targets and accoutrements hanging off the bottom of the playfield. So the thing weighs like 80, 90 pounds. But I'm going to go ahead and get it out of here, and we'll look down inside the cabinet and see where we're going to start. So this is where the horrible thing happened. Somebody gave up on this machine. Oh, crazy. There should be a power supply right here. And it's a transformer block. So there was a board that mounted there. You can see the dust. There was a transformer back here, and then there was a rectifier board that goes right here. And this plugged into the rectifier board, and there were a couple other plugs that plugged into it. And somebody, in their greed and their hatred, has stolen the power supply out of this game. That's horrible. That's like stealing the heart out of it. And this was an amazing machine at one point, so we're going to make it amazing again. So we've got to fix that. Like I said, I've got one out of a parted out Stern Stingray. It's a little bit different. So we're going to look in the manual and see if it's even similar. You know, what it's supposed to, see if the voltages are the same. I believe they're all about the same, and that it will certainly work with the wrong one in it, but we're going to find out. So we cleaned it up a little bit in the previous video, got all of the extra trash out of there. But basically, the original one would have been a board that mounts there, just a piece of plywood that mounts there, comes down to about here, and there was a rectifier board sitting here that this plugged into and a couple other connections. So we're just going to redo that. We've got the mount is different on the one we've got, but if we make a big board, it ought to just mount right to it, no problem. You can see the screw holes where they removed it, whoever those horrible, horrible people were. So yeah, that's what we're starting with. The power comes in through the power cord into this line filter, and there's a varistor there. Varistor. That's one of those where I don't think anybody knows how to pronounce it, so you can't really say it wrong. And then it comes out of the line filter. You have 2 black lines. That's been taped. Oh, God. We're finding more horrors as time goes on. You got 2 black lines and 2 white lines. Okay, they're running forward. Okay, this is more stuff we can look in the schematics for. So the black and the white line, at least one of them, runs to the power switch. Not really sure where the other ones run. We might have to look into that. And then they come out of the power switch as a blue and white line and a yellow line, which runs over to the power supply. Here, you know. So we'll look in the schematics, but I don't like that tape. I don't know what's up with that. I might look into that. Maybe somebody's replaced this line filter at some point. But I don't know why you would tape it when you could just... Oh yeah, so the line filter, these lines are coming out of the inside of the line filter. So that's why they needed some kind of connection there. Okay, we'll figure that out. But let me get our Stingray power supply and we'll take a little look at it. Now people, it's old, okay? So don't expect nothing that looks brand new. The transformer's the problem here. You can't buy a brand new transformer. But let's see what we got. Okay, so here's what I've got. Again, we had to make our board. The original transformer set farther back, about right here, which for weight would be good because, you know. And then there were longer wires, and you had your rectifier board was able to stand up here or something like that. We're not going to do that just because we don't have that mount. There's a shield you can put over this. I think will be fine. And then the only wire that really the length or whatever is critical is this one. It just has to reach. So originally it would have plugged into a vertically sitting board about right here. We're going to have it plug in, and it's keyed, so we're going to have it plug in about right here. And that should be fine. But we have to make sure first that this transformer and this rectifier board are the same. So this is the one out of a Stingray. I think the only difference really is the mounts. I think the voltages are the same or close enough to the same. So we're going to look that up and make sure that we're on the right page with that. But that should be the guts of what we need at least. This bracket here is because it originally would have been in an upright game. So it would have sat up here in the corner in the back box. And they do this so that they could put a shield around it so that whenever you went in there you didn't accidentally touch one of these lugs. Well, once they mounted it on the bottom, there was no shield around it because I guess they figured if you were up inside of it that far back, you would know enough not to get shocked. I guess. But really the only difference is going to be on the original one, this would have been mounted without this. The feet would have just been mounted to the piece of wood. And then the wires would have been longer, and this same board, I believe, would have mounted to a bracket that would position it vertically. It doesn't really matter. You could make the argument that if it's vertical, anything that falls off the playfield wouldn't short anything out, but I mean, if they're worried about that, they've got the speaker beneath it, and you know, nothing should fall off of the playfield. And if we put a little plastic guard on it, Bally had a guard that they put on theirs, and also later on Bally put theirs all under the playfield. So I don't know. I think that's why they mounted it vertically, to kind of minimize that. But you look, people, we got to work with what we got. We could take all the trouble to fabricate a new mount, I guess, but I'm not super worried about it. I guess we can try to bend that flat too. I think we'll be fine with it mounted. Prostate. Alright, so let's look in the manual though and make sure that it's the same, that a Stingray power supply is able to run a Flight 2000. Okay folks, so this is the manual for a Stingray. So this is the power supply that we've got. It is a Stern 16B-3 transformer. Okay. Now, what I've done is I pulled up the manual for a Flight 2000, and it is a Stern 16B-6 transformer. But I'm thinking that may just be because of the mounting differences. But if you look, if we go back and forth, it's pretty much exactly the same. You can check it out yourself. Very little difference. All of the voltages are the same. So I think it will work just fine. So now we're going to go look at the schematics where it shows the power, and just make sure that it looks like the power coming out, going to the rectifier board and out of the rectifier board seems the same. Okay, so here is the power supply transformer for the Stingray. Now they've got it a little bit in a different order. See this 173 volt? It's down here on this Flight 2000 drawing, but it's the same setup. It's got the same wiring on the same lugs with the same fuse values and everything, and the same voltages off of the transformer. So there's 5 voltages coming off. This says 4, but if you look over here, it ends up being 43 volts after it goes through this bridge. Over on this one, this is the Stingray, 43 volts after it goes through the bridge. So 173 volts, 173 volts down here, and if you go to 7.3 volts AC, over here 7.3 volts AC, and then you go back 7.8 volts AC, 7.8 volts AC, and see, like if you look, pins 13 and 14, lug 13 and 14 create that. If you go to the other one, 7.8 volt AC, 13 and 14 create that. So it's the same. 12 volt AC, 15 and 16. 12 volt AC, 15 and 16. It is virtually identical. So it looks like it's the exact same transformer. Now they give it a different part number, but I think it's just because it's mounted in that case on the one and it's not on the other. So everything looks the same to me. We'll double check all the fuses and stuff whenever we go to put it all together and put the ones in it that should be in it according to the manual. But looks to me like it's exactly the same. So then we got to see if the pinout is the same on the rectifier board. I believe it's the exact same board. Okay, so looking at the pinout, it looks like they're pretty much identical. They name things a little bit differently, but if you look at where they connect to on the rectifier board, these pins are the same on both of them. So I think there's no different voltages on them. I think we're good to go. So our next thing is we need to build a board to mount the thing to in the bottom of the cabinet to try to replace the one that came out. So let me show you a picture of how it originally looked. Okay, so this is a picture from pinballmania.com where they were selling one, and you can see what I'm talking about. There's a board there, goes on the right side, it mounts flush with the back brace, and then comes out until about halfway up the board that holds the speaker on it, and that's where the rectifier board was, and then the transformer was back about halfway. So we're going to make that board, and we're going to move everything up a little bit, because I have to get this a little bit farther forward so that the wires will connect. And then the transformer, the wires aren't long enough, so it'll be up here kind of on this support. So we're going to cut us a piece of plywood to replace that missing board. Matt's here.
Sorry.
God. All right, so we cut our board. That was the perfect. That was the perfect acting job that I did. That was perfect. Like that was exactly the spirit I wanted to convey. Matt's here. we got our board. Look at that. That's going to be perfect. So I'm going to take this in the back room and we're going to rebuild it a little bit and then mount it to the board. So Matt wasn't here for the beginning, so I got to clue him in. This is out of a Stingray parts machine.
Okay.
The Flight 2000 was missing the power supply. Somebody started parting the game and they're trying to destroy it. So we're trying to fix it. But this is the wrong setup.
Okay.
The transformer's slightly different on the Flight 2000, but the voltages and everything seem to be the same in the manual. This board originally on the Flight 2000 mounts vertically because it's under the playfield. And usually these are in the back box.
Right.
But since it's under the playfield, if it was like this, something might fall on it, but you know, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, it's got that plastic guard.
It doesn't. I added that.
Oh, well, now it'll be fine.
Now it'll be fine. So there we go. Yeah, so this plastic guard is off of a Bally. But Stern ripped off Bally. They copied their design on like every single board.
I think everyone pretty much copied everyone.
Yeah. So apparently what happened was Bally had, whenever they went solid state, 1977, they had a company design all of their boards. And then Stern, in his wisdom, bought the company. And then therefore, they couldn't enforce patents or anything. He just had the company make him boards that say Stern. Apparently, that's the story.
Well, having good authority, you can just call the guy up and ask him.
That's true. I'm one of these. If I ever got to talk to Gary Stern, I would ask him that. I'd say, "Hey, tell me about how you screwed over Bally in 1977." Okay, so we're going to use this board. It actually looks pretty good. You might be thinking, "Oh, it's old. Why are you going to use that? Put in a switching power supply." People tell me that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to just have a bunch of switching noise in all your circuits, sure.
But this one is a, it's, you know, pinball machines have, you just saw whenever we were looking at the schematics, they have 5 different voltages that they need. So, you know, it's a little complex.
And they're usually AC voltages too.
Some of them, yeah. But this is the rectifier board.
Yeah.
So you got 3 bridges here that are going to change some of that. Okay, so I'm going to take it apart, which basically is you take these 3 screws out, which are through the 3 bridges. And sometimes you have to mess with the mounts here, but we'll pop it off and you can see the back of the board. Basically, resoldering these pins is the most important thing to do to them. Okay, so this is the back side of the rectifier board. So there are these 3 small bridge rectifiers that mount to the plate, and the screws hold it to this heat sink, basically. Or the whole thing's a heat sink, basically. You can replace those with a beefier one. You can take those and actually mount the things on the front. If you look at it, there's a positive and a negative, and then you got your 2 AC lines. So you can put a bigger bridge in those same 4 mounting holes and have it up on the front, but it's a little tight. So you can do it though, just bend them kind of out of the way. We've done that on some of our previous videos, but I usually don't mess with it unless it's blowing bridge rectifiers. So I'm going to leave it how it is for now. But that's like an upgrade that you can do. The only reason you don't put them on the back is because they're just bigger, so they won't fit on the heatsink. If you put it on the top, you can put it like a separate heatsink on it and bolt it right through the middle. But if you go, let's see what Matt thinks about this. Matt is an engineer. Matt, so that's an 8 amp bridge.
Okay.
Let's say I was going to put a 25 amp bridge on the other side to replace that 8 amp bridge. Would it need a heatsink?
Have to look at the data sheet, but probably not.
That's what I was kind of thinking. I've done that before, and I didn't put a heatsink on. But you can do it how you want, people. I'm sure the way you do it will be best. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean off these pins here, and then we're going to resolder them. That's another thing that you can do. You can replace those pins if you want. This one here, though, they're pretty clean. I mean, they're not all burnt up or anything. I honestly don't know how much use this power supply got. A lot of times these will, the housings will be all discolored and everything. So sometimes you have to replace them just because they're burnt to a crisp. But sometimes you don't have to. So I'm going to clean these up and resolder them. There are no broken solder joints, though, that I can see. So the thing's in pretty good shape, looking pretty good. Let's see if I can show you. It's hard to light it where you can kind of tell. I don't really see any broken solder joints. I'm thinking maybe this thing just sat in the machine for a while, didn't get much play, and they parted it out. But what do you think about those hand-drawn traces there, Matt?
That's actually real interesting how they used to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a two-sided board, right?
No? One. Oh, yeah, two-sided. Yep, you're right.
So the way they used to do those is they would draw... You know, if you ever use schematic software, I know you haven't, but some of the viewers, you know how like some of the top layers will be red and the bottom layers will be blue in the schematic software? Is because when they would draw these, they draw them on transparencies, and they would hand draw the red circuit and on top and the blue circuit for the bottom. And when the board maker would make the board, they'd actually take the transparency, put a red filter on, and burn the blue layer, and they'd put a blue filter on and burn the red layer, and that's how they got the layer alignments.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how they did that. And like you said, they just took a red Sharpie and drew that stuff by hand.
It's pretty cool. This one, I mean, I guess this is hand drawn, right? It's pretty square. We get them from time to time that are like they're squiggly lines.
Yeah, and I mean, later years they had like the transparent like tape, so they'd have like pieces of tape.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And standard packages, they would have like you could buy like a 8-pin dip package and you just stick it on.
Oh yeah, that's pretty cool.
So you wouldn't have to draw that package accurately every time. All
right, so I'm going to resolder. I'm going to clean all these with the wire brush. The reason I'm doing that is so that solder will stick well.
Yep.
And we're just getting dust and dirt off of it. And then we're going to flip it back over and check all the fuse holders and test the 3 bridges to make sure they're all fine. And I was going to leave that big case on here, but I started thinking about it. I'll probably need that for the upright. So I took it off. Since we're mounting this to a board, we won't necessarily need it for what we're using it for. Okay, so let me resolder those and then we'll look at the front. All right, so here's the top side. It's a little bit dirty, but everything's cool. I checked all the fuses. They're all good and they're all the right value as according to this. So I'm going to look in the manual to make sure that on Flight 2000 these are all supposed to be the same. I also checked these 4 diodes here. They're for one of the lamp voltages. They're fine. Oh, that's cool. So we're going to check these diodes. I mean, these bridges. They're basically, a bridge rectifier is just 4 diodes, basically. So if you take your positive lead on diode check on your multimeter, and you put your positive lead on negative, and then you check to the adjacent pin, which is one of the AC pins, you should get like a voltage drop situation. What do they call that, Matt?
The forward voltage?
Forward voltage, is that what it is?
The voltage drop is the forward voltage, yeah.
0.502. So if you're between about 0.4 and about 0.7, you're good. And then we're going to do it with the next one. 0.502. Now, so you just checked like basically the diode from there and the diode to there. So you still got 2 more to check. So on this one where it says positive, you put your negative lead and you check from there to the AC line, AC pin, and you should get something similar. So we're basically measuring how much voltage drops, right? Is that right?
That's correct.
And so we're getting 0.5. That falls within our where we want to be. And then our next one, same thing. Now they don't have to all be the same or anything like that. You're just looking for something that's an extreme. So if it's 0.4 or 0.398, it's probably all right, but you don't want to be way off that. But if it says 0.2, well, it's pretty much shorted. Something's wrong. Sometimes though, you'll have the way it's wired in circuit is giving you that reading, but There's exceptions to everything. So if it's like 0.2, well, then it's almost short. It's shorted too much. If it's 0.8, 0.9, it's basically open. And so it's not right either. You want that to be between 0.4 and 0.8. And then when you go the other way, it shouldn't do it. But typically, if you're getting the voltage drop the one way, it doesn't really... If you measure the other way, you don't usually have a problem. Is that correct, Matt? Is that how you've seen it?
Yeah,
So I just checked the diode, and I'm getting 0.5 on all four of them, basically.
Right, and if you measure in reverse, you're just going to get open.
Yeah, but if it was screwed up, so that test, so I'm not doing that test. If I do it in reverse, I really don't have to if I got good measurements the other way, because it would be rare for short to be messed up like that. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, normally they just fail open at that point.
Yeah. Okay, so we think we're good. So I tested all three of them. They seem fine. But yeah, you can do that if you want. You can do it the other way around too. So they all seem cool. The fuses all seem cool. The diodes are cool. All of these we cleaned with our wire brush, but you know. So there's just not much to this thing. There's two big old freaking resistors here that are fine. And that's really all that's here. We've got a varistor here. Is it varistor or varistor?
The metal oxide varistor is what I've always heard.
Varistor. So you see what he did? He said it was the one that I didn't say. You see how he does? I said varistor, and he said, "Oh no, it was varistor."
Honestly, I only ever see it written, so it's kind of a guess. It's one of those words you always see in paper, but you never say out loud.
I wish I could get I've had people before when I ask about things like that, people swear up and down both sides of it. So somebody say, "Oh, it's definitely varistor," and then somebody else say, "It was definitely varistor."
I'm guessing half of them are British and half of them aren't.
Probably. But we love our British people, so don't think we're saying anything bad about it. If we get tons of British people watching the channel, or people from the UK, and then also a lot of Australians who, you know, are the people that they kicked out of the UK.
Yeah, the people that weren't good enough to be British.
Yeah. And New Zealand, I think, maybe got kicked out of the Australia.
Yeah,
I don't know how they came to be.
Yeah, I'm not up on my New Zealand history.
But we got a bunch of people from New Zealand watching too.
New Zealanders evolved from hobbits.
No, that's just where they filmed the movie, man.
I mean, okay.
That's not real. That's fake. Don't listen to them, people. You Kiwis. We love our Kiwis. We don't think you're all hobbits. They filmed it over there, Matt, because that's one of the most beautiful places in the world.
And kiwi fruit's delicious.
That too. And there's no kangaroos there. They're all in Australia. You got to keep that straight. They hate it. If you screw up if you mix up those two, they hate it, I hear. But anyway, okay, so we got this. I'm going to put it back on the thing, and then we're going to mount it to this board, and then we're going to go mount it in the game. Okay, folks, so we mounted it back in there. On the original, this transformer would have been farther back here, but the lines were longer on that model of it. And because we're mounting it flat, that puts these connectors a little farther back. So I've got them all the way up at the edge of the board, and I moved it up far enough to where it can reach it and have a little bit of play. We're going to repin this connector, but I wanted to go ahead and plug it in and see if the thing will come on. It hasn't been turned on in a long time, so I don't even know if we'll know that it's on. I believe one of these does the back box and one does the playfield or something. But we'll see. Maybe we'll get some coin door lights or something to come on. So let me get the cord and we'll plug it up and see if it does anything or if this blows up or what the deal is. Okay, folks, we've got it plugged up. Let's try it. It's alive. It's coming back. We have two coin door light bulbs on, Matt. What do you think about that?
It's better than zero.
This thing has been dead for decades, probably. They may have just, they parted it like 2 years ago or something.
Yeah.
But I like to act like that it's been dead for 30 years and I'm fixing it. So I think they parted it about 1990.
I mean, broke is broke.
Broke is broke. So she's coming back now. Okay, so that's that. Like I said, we're going to have to repin that connector though. There should be a big connector from the top. Maybe it's just stuck up in there or something. Hell yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, cool. There's our speaker connection I was wondering about. So that's what this plugs into. And this is the big connector for there. Same thing. It needs to be repinned. None of these particularly look burnt up or anything, though. A lot of times, though, yeah, that one's getting a little heat. So we'll have to replace all of those, but I guess I could go ahead and plug it in and see if we get anything in the back box. Now, in the previous video, we looked in the back box, and there's no solenoid driver board, which means that all of the voltages for the chips and everything are not even being created because the 5-volt regulator is not in there. These things are keyed. Well, that one's not. If it's not keyed, sometimes you can tell by looking. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The key is pin 7.
Look at which one has no wire.
Yeah, so pin 7, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 has a wire, so that must not be the key. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it must be that one is supposed to be the key. Another thing you can do is, you can't always trust this, but see how the open face of the connector is here? And if you look on this one, it is the same. The open face of the connector is pointing towards the front. So they should plug in the same.
Is that roughly where the original supply would have mounted?
Pretty much, yep. But it was vertical.
Okay.
It had like a little plate to make it stand straight up in the air.
Because sometimes you can tell by how the cable's like trained to want to lay naturally.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So that's the back box connector. So we're going to plug it in now. The displays. There are some displays mounted in it. There's 2 of them actually. But they're not going to get any voltage because they run off 5 volts and they run off of 175 volts, which is created. This sends power up to that solenoid board, which isn't even in the machine. So normally you wouldn't want to just turn on power to the thing when you have the displays hooked up because it might fry something or whatever, but they're literally not plugged in right now. Well, if I can get the switch to work. We're getting there. She's trying to do a little something. Back glass is going to need some work. We'll have to do a whole video working on that back glass. It's got issues, but I think we'll get it. Okay, so very cool. So the third connector is for the playfield. We won't mess with that right now, though. I think the next step is I'm going to go ahead and repin those connectors, just so that we make sure that they're nice and solid and steady and everything's cool. I'll show you how we do that and what tools we use and all that. And it really won't make it look any better or work any better, but it'll make it where hopefully that thing's nice and solid for a while to come. Okay, so we're going to replace a couple of these pins so you can see it. So here's the connector. I swapped a couple of them already. You can swap the whole connector too, but at that point you're just splurging, people. It's plastic. It's not going to... Come on, people. It's fine. It's just plastic, people. Come on now. By the way, I have it unplugged. If it's not unplugged, you've got 180 volts on here. Or 200 volts, something like that. Okay, so I use a little flathead screwdriver. There's probably a tool for it. But there's a little retaining tab here that you kind of push down. Possibly, maybe. It's my big shot, and I blew it. So you can pull the pin out. So basically there is a little tab there. You can't see that great. But I bent it down with the screwdriver so that it would slide out of the slot. Okay. So then I cut the old one off. Now cut it real close, people. Again, you don't want to splurge. You only got so much wire here. And then you want to trim it up a little bit so you got a little bit of it sticking out. Something like that. And then I've got these crimpers. These are my favorite ones. You can get different kinds. These are little cheapo ones. They're like 15 bucks or something. I have these on my website. You can go check it out if you want to order some. I happen to be left-handed, so I've reversed these blades on this pair just because it works better if I hold it in my left hand. Okay? Because there's some screws here. You can swap them. But normally they would be backwards, so you could hold it in your right hand. But you do what you prefer. Okay? And then the way I do it is, since I have it set up like this, I take one of the terminals, and you can actually, I almost put it the wrong way. You can actually put it in the jaws. And you hear how it clicked, so it's kind of holding it. So it's basically holding it in place, kind of. Let's go one more maybe. Okay, I double clicked that one, so it's holding it in place. And then since it's doing that, you can carefully slide the wire in there. And after a while, you get pretty decent at it. And there's a certain depth you slide it into. And then whenever you squeeze this until it releases, it perfectly crimps it. So you've got one set of crimps around the actual insulation and this other set of crimps around the actual wire. And so it's got a real nice crimp. And then once you do that, you just slide it, twist it where it's the right direction. Slide it back into the correct ramping, locking pin or whatever, and it won't pull out now because of that little twisty thing. So, where can you get that stuff if you're doing yours? Well, you can get all of these terminals, stuff like this, and the housings and all that stuff. You can get it a lot of places. Molex made most of it. But the easiest way to get it, in my opinion, is to go to a website called Great Plains Electronics. There's a guy named Ed that runs that site. I don't know Ed. I've just bought a bunch of stuff from him over the years. He doesn't pay me to do ads for him or anything, but he has a great site because all he really sells is little stuff like this. So like the little pins that go in the connector and different lengths and all of that. And he's got just the right stuff for pinball machines because he kind of focuses on that. Okay. He also has crimpers and all the tools and stuff you need, so you can go there and check that out. If you want to see the tools we use, like the specific one we use, like I said, these are pretty cheap. Some of these can get really expensive. You can go on our website, go to lionsarcade.com, and there's a parts page up on the top. And it's got links to a bunch of stuff on Amazon. If you buy anything on Amazon after you click one of those links, even if it's not what was on the link. So let's say you go to Amazon and you buy a Ferrari. I get 3% of it. So I say that in all the videos. And I had a guy the other day mail me a Ferrari that he bought on Amazon. He said he couldn't resist. So he went to Amazon, he bought me a Ferrari to prove that it's possible. We now have a Ferrari from Amazon. So we appreciate that. But anyway, go check that out. So I'm going to repin all of these. And then basically that'll make it have a stronger contact. You can also get trifuricon connectors, which are a three-sided connector. So instead of the one flat blade against the side of the post, it has three. So it grabs the side and both other sides, three of the sides. Trifuricon. Ed sells those as well. In my opinion, it's a little overkill. You don't really need that. But if you would like to do that at your home machine and you want it to be as nice as it can possibly be, you can go buy those as well if you want. But I'm going to repin those so that you get a nice clean signal and you don't have any kind of resistance at the pins. And then we're going to check voltages on it, and that should be our power supply. All right, folks, so we're going to test the voltages. I've got it all rigged up here. So the ground I have, basically you just want to test the ground at the ground trace, the game that's on too, by the way. The ground trace. This big resistor here, one leg of it solders into the ground, so that's a good place to grab the ground. And then the positive, you can actually check on these test points. Some of them have a little loop, and some of them have these little tunnels. It just depends on which version of the power supply it is. And we're going to check in the manual to see if everything's right. So we're on test point 1. The manual says it should be 5.4 volts DC, which is the feature lamp bus. We're at 6.2 volts DC, but there's no load on it right now. So there's no, none of the feature lamps are lit up. All of the ones that are lit up are the general illumination lamps. So it's a little bit high, but that seems pretty common. Okay. So that is the one that is created by bridge rectifier number 1. So that's that. So now we're going to move over to pin 2. Test point 2. 197 volts. Now it says on here it should be 230 volts. Right? That is the display voltage that goes up to the solenoid board and gets turned down. So I've always wondered why that is lower than it's supposed to be when you don't have the regulator board plugged in. And someone was telling me, or a couple people were telling me, it's because there's no capacitor on the line yet. So when you plug the solenoid board in, that voltage shoots up to about 240 volts and then gets regulated back down to whatever you adjust it to. So it's usually adjusted to 175, 180, something like that. So right now it's at 197. Once we plug in the regulator board, it's got this huge capacitor on it, that will actually raise. Okay, so you might be thinking, well, why are you even testing this if the voltages are nowhere near what they're supposed to be? Well, they kind of are near what they're supposed to be. They're we're looking for, is there a voltage missing, or is there one like way out of line? Okay, so right now we're doing pretty good. So both of those are good. Moving right along, test point 3. Test point 3, 12.59 volts. It should be 11.9 volts, and that is the voltage that goes up to the regulator board and gets turned into 5 volts to run all of the ICs. So you might say, well, why is that a separate voltage than the 5 volts that's used for the switched lights? Well, they just kept it separate, I guess. I don't know. But that is the voltage that gets on the solenoid board that gets regulated to 5, so that it can run all of the ICs. A 5 volt source that's running all the ICs needs to be pretty close. So I guess they just kept it separate than the lights for whatever reason. But that's a good one. So it's a little bit high. Again, it's regulated. It's regulated down to 5 volts on the solenoid board, and also there's no load on it right now. Okay. Test point 4, we're going to skip because it's an AC voltage. Then we're going to go to test point 5. It's 45.5. It's supposed to be 43. It's the solenoid voltage. Same thing. None of the solenoids are actually working right now. And everything's a little bit high just because our line voltage is a little bit high. So that's that. All right, so now we'll switch over to AC and check test point 4. Test point 4, 7 volts. It says on here that it should be 7.3 volts. That's the voltage for the general illumination, which is all of the light bulbs, like on the coin door, the back glass, the playfield, all of that. The ones that are on right now. So why is that one a little bit low? I don't know. I'm not so sure it's supposed to be 7.3. The bulbs all say they're 6 volt bulbs, so I don't know. It's just an AC voltage too. It doesn't run through a bridge rectifier. So that's what the transformer's putting out. I'm not too worried about it. Maybe if we didn't have any bulbs in, it would be higher, and I don't know. But that's close enough for me. They look nice and bright. So I'm not too worried about it. So I think that gives us all of our power supply voltages. I'm going to put the little cover over it, and we're done with the power supply. If you find yourself worried about the power supply being in the bottom of the cabinet, here is an 8-ball deluxe from a little bit later where Bally did the same thing. They eventually moved to where all of the power supplies were laying flat in the bottom of the cabinet like this. So there's precedent for it. We're just pushing it back a little farther than it was. This is Bally Midway's Pinball 2000, although it had a nice cover over it, but the board's down in the bottom too. Okay, so we got the cover mounted on it. I think we'll be good. So that's that. One of the big steps taken care of. We got 2 big steps left. Painting the back glass is going to be a big deal, and painting the playfield is going to be a big deal. But everything else is downhill from there. So on our next video, we'll work on the solenoid board and see if the MPU actually boots once we get that in there. Now, the solenoid board's completely missing, so we're going to have to find one, scrounge around for one for it. And I just looked online. They do make a replacement power supply for the upright one. I mean, not the upright ones, the ones that fit in the back box on other games. You can get it at Pinball Life now with the transformer and everything. But you have to buy the whole assembly, and it's $350. Which is a good alternative if you need one. But we basically took a used one and used it. So they didn't have the one with the bracket, all that good stuff. So I'm happy with it. I think we pulled it off. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to leave your comments down below. Give us a thumbs up for taking the trouble to film it for you. And if you haven't checked out my brother Donnie yet, this is our brother channel here on YouTube. Go check it out. What are you waiting on? If you like watching us work on these old pinball machines, you'd probably like he and I working on old buildings. We've got a couple old buildings that we bought in a small town near here, and we are fixing them up to help revitalize their downtown area. So go check that out. Link is down below, and we'll see you next time. We'll start working on the boards in the back box.